Thank you so much, and namaste, everyone. Um, I have to admit that I'm a little nervous over here because I've not done this for about the last 1.5 years. So, in fact, whenever I do these events or concerts online, I'm always complaining when I start the concert that, that instead of looking into the faces of my audience, I'm actually looking directly into the lens of a camera, and that's quite unnerving because being a musician, I always love looking into the faces of my audience and and getting feedback, instantaneous feedback, and feeding off the energy of them. But today, I think I'm going to have to imagine that I'm looking into the lens of a camera and do this. And of course, I'm not used to wearing long pants while doing this anymore. That's Zoom, right? And then, of course, on Clubhouse, it's something completely different. But anyway, so I'm Ricky. I'm a musician. I'm an environmentalist. Two pillars that have pretty much dictated my whole life and all of my life decisions. And for the last few years, the only kind of music that I make is about sustainability and positive social impact. So that's the only kind of music that I make, and that's why most of you have not heard my music. Anyway, so basically, uh, growing up as a child, I've always been a musician. I've always been an environmentalist. I've been an environmentalist before I even knew what the meaning of that word was. So as a child, like in my second grade, third grade, I my ears were always more important than my eyes. So while my classmates were very fascinated by television, by cartoons, by video games, and things like that, my music system was the center of my universe. So I was obsessed with my music system, and my dad had this massive music collection, which was not just the pop tracks from those days, like the Bee Gees or Michael Jackson, and groups like that, but also he had a lot of obscure music from different parts of the world, from South Africa, from different parts of Asia, from South America, from different parts of Europe, a lot of indigenous music. So he had this massive music collection, and I would listen to music all day long. Hey, Vikram. So I would listen, I'd listen to music all day long, and I would sort of like, pull apart this music, try to understand what are the different instruments used in every single piece of music. So Vikram, I was just telling them that my dad had this large music collection, but not as large as yours. But anyway, so I would pull apart this music, and I would try to understand who are the different instrumentalists and what kind of cultures these different instrumentalists came from, and the instruments come from which country. And I used to play this game, with myself that, I would read the inlay cards of all these cassette tapes and these vinyls, and I would try to find similar musicians in different bands and try to understand, why are the musicians being repeated and all of that stuff. And it was through music that I fell in love with our natural world. And it's very difficult, it was rather very difficult for me to explain as to why I felt that music and nature is one and the same. I felt they both were one entity. And of course, now I can explain it better because at the end of the day, how did music start? Music started off as sounds from within nature. And then later on, it became, human beings trying to imitate those sounds and making it more pleasing to our ears. And then later on, it became human beings pulling out objects from nature and creating musical instruments from it. And of course, for the last few centuries, music has become academic with notes and scales and things like that. But nevertheless, music is nature. And if you look at any indigenous tribe anywhere in the world or any indigenous population, music is still sounds of nature, and music is still singing about nature and making music about nature. Anyway, and also I realized while growing up that I was a very weird child. I grew up, even though I spent most of my life and my growing years in India, up to the age of 8, I was in USA. I was in North Carolina in this really small town called Roanoke Rapids, which is on the border of North Carolina with Virginia. And we used to live in pretty much in the middle of nowhere. And there was a lot of wooded areas around our home. My father is a doctor, and he was a doctor over there. And we used to have a lot of these creepy crawly animals that used to keep coming and visiting our home, like snakes and lizards and other reptiles and frogs and insects and things like that. And while everybody's knee-jerk reaction and everybody's instruction to me was that run away from these animals or immediately step on them and kill them, I used to always wonder. I used to look into the eyes of these animals, and I used to be drawn towards them. I used to see personality in every single animal. And my question to everybody was that if we're just supposed to kill them immediately after we see them, then why do they exist on our planet? Why do they exist over here? What is their purpose over here? And of course, many, many years later, I understood that every single species, no matter how seemingly dangerous or seemingly insignificant, forms a very, very important part of our ecosystem. And that particular ecosystem balance is what keeps us alive. So that's basically how I spent my childhood. Then many, many years later, and many years later, I became a professional musician. And how I became a professional musician, being in a family of doctors and Indian parents, is is quite a story in itself. But that's probably for another talk. But nevertheless, I think that was the greatest achievement of my life, getting to become a musician in my family. But nevertheless, so I started off my career doing advertising jingles, commercials for television and radio. So I did a whole lot of them. In a span of 13 years, I did more than 3,500 of them. So I was pretty successful doing that. I did jingles for everybody from Google to Microsoft to Airtel to Vodafone to TVS to Suzuki, Air India, Lufthansa, basically every single brand and their competitor everywhere in the world. I was basically creating music for them. And it sort of dawned on me after doing this for so many years and working so hard, sometimes composing 2 to 3 commercials for different time zones every single day. It sort of dawned on me that these big brands have understood the power of music. Now, they've understood the power of music so much so that they're ready to spend a few $1,000s on me to create a piece of music for them to actually sell a product, because they're always trying to sell a product, right? And not only that, they're ready to spend a few $1 million to actually air that music on television and radio. So they've understood that music is not only a powerful language for communication, but also a powerful language to retain a message deep in the consciousness of a listener. Like the songs we learned during our childhood are the songs we never forget. If there are any morals in those songs, those morals pretty much dictate our lives forever. And of course, the jingles that we've heard during our childhood always stick with us. So that's pretty much the power of music. And these big brands understood this so well that they were ready to base their multi-million-dollar campaigns on music. So again, as I said, after doing this for 13 years, this dawned on me and I realized that I, being a musician, there are so many things that I feel strongly about. There are so many things that keep me awake at night. So I need to understand the power of music and harness this power of music for myself. So that is when I decided that every single piece of music that comes off my fingers, off my studio, off my head, every single piece of music that I make is going to, in my own small way, in my own small individual capacity, is going to be for making this world a better place. And that is the only kind of music that I'm going to make. It's going to be about social impact and about environmental conservation and sustainability and all these related topics around that. Now, so that started off my journey into music. And then, as I said, I wrote songs on so many varied topics that would keep me up awake at night, like, climate change and climate action, obviously, and species extinction, biodiversity, deforestation, a lot of society issues. I've written a lot of music on, on refugee rights, on children's rights, and various other things. So what I'm going to be talking to you about right now is the word coexistence. Now, if you think about the word coexistence nowadays, the only thing that seems to come to our mind is living in absolute peace and absolute harmony between different parts of the human race. Like, coexistence means that living in peace and harmony between Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, Christians, Jews, Buddhists, Jains, and people of different socioeconomic statuses and things like that. But if you look at any ancient culture anywhere in the world, and not just Indian culture, but any ancient culture anywhere in the world, coexistence has always been defined as living in absolute peace and absolute harmony absolute peace and absolute harmony with all life. And not only that, it goes one step further. So it's not just humans, but all life. But it goes one step further, that you have to live in peace and harmony with every single entity, whether living or non-living. So which means that we not only have to coexist with all life, but we also have to coexist with the elements of nature, like the water we drink, the air we breathe, the land we walk on. So, in fact, the Ishavasya Idam, the mantra, the shloka, there is a translation by Mahatma Gandhi of this Ishavasya Idam, which actually says that that this particular mantra means that there is the divine in every single atom of this universe, whether that atom goes on to building something that is animate or inanimate. So that's basically what our ancient culture speaks about. Now, I'm really, really proud that in our country of India, we have lived in coexistence with our forests and wildlife for the longest period of time. We've revered our forests, we revere our wildlife, we pray to our forests, we pray to our wildlife, and emblematic of this reverence is one particular animal, that is the elephant, All of us love the elephant. Who loves the elephant? Those who are using their cell phones don't like the elephant. Anyway, so emblematic of this reverence of forests and wildlife in India is basically the elephant. But then again, with growing human population, growing human greed, with with the fragmentation of the elephant habitat, degradation of the elephant habitat, basically there is something known as human and elephant conflict that is happening in India, which is quite powerful, which is pretty much like a warlike situation between humans and elephants. And this human and elephant conflict has replaced poaching as being the #1 cause for elephant mortality in India. So which means that poaching is no longer that big a deal in India as much as human and elephant conflict. Now, when there is this human and elephant conflict and it reaches a warlike situation where there is loss of life on either the elephant side or the human side, basically humans living in the fringe areas of forests, usually it happens around those areas. But if there is loss of life on either side, especially the human side, because it's the humans who actually vote for our politicians, but nevertheless, if there's loss of life on the human side, then our politicians and our leaders have to make the very, very painful decision to do something about it. So of course, our protection laws are very, very strong that you cannot kill an elephant. So basically, what they would do is that they would do the humane solution of capturing the elephant and relocating the elephant. Now, it seems very humane that you're just capturing the elephant and you're relocating the elephant. You're not shooting down the elephant. But this process itself is extremely excruciating, extremely painful, mentally traumatizing, not just for the elephant, and that is obvious, but for all the humans involved in the capturing process, which begs to ask us the question that why can't we just live and let live? So I'd written a song about this, and of course, in recent times, about a year back, all of us saw the image, the really horrible image of the pregnant elephant in Kerala, who consumed a pineapple which was filled with explosives, and she ate that pineapple in a farmland. So she wandered out of the forest. She went into a farmland which used to be the forest, and she ate the pineapple. And then she wandered around, basically waiting to die. And then she went to a river. She stood in the river. And then she basically died while standing up. So that was a really, really powerful image, which went all over the world. Because it was just a super, super powerful image that showcased that this is what can happen and this is what our human impact is on wildlife. Now, if you think about it, the knee-jerk reaction of everybody all over the world, especially India, was that those farmers need to be punished, right? Those farmers need to be hanged to death. They need to be stoned or whatever. That those farmers are at fault, or what's up with Kerala? What is Kerala doing and all of that stuff. But if you think about it, we living in urban areas, we have to think about cause and effect. So we living in urban areas, if there is a new iPhone, like the new iPhone 13 released recently. So if there's a new iPhone or a new whatever phone, and if it's out of stock and it's not available online and you're really, really desperate to purchase it, you're so inconvenienced that why don't they manufacture more of them, Why can't they get more iPhones? Why are they out of stock? It's ridiculous. And then if you don't have electricity for even 2 minutes or 3 minutes, you're so inconvenienced. But if you think about it, for that electricity, where is all that coal coming from? Where is all that coming from? And for your iPhones, where is all that magnesium? Where is all that lead? Where is all that silica? Where is all that iron ore coming from? It's basically coming from digging up those forests, right? And once you dig up those forests, you're basically destroying the elephant habitat. And when you destroy the elephant habitat, the elephant is forced to move out of the forest and find other ways to get food or to get sustenance. They go into the neighboring areas, and the poor villagers are the ones who are affected. So basically, for no fault of their own, the villagers are the ones who are affected. And they have to take care of their livelihoods. They have to take care of their families. And that's why they have to make the very wrong decision, and it's a very wrong decision that they make. But they make the very wrong decision, but the very painful decision to actually protect their families by doing these horrible things. So I do believe that they should be absolutely punished for doing this. But at the same time, we have to look inwards. And we have to understand that all of us are at fault for that elephant actually passing away, because it's all our consumption patterns which are basically causing that. So this is a song that I'm going to show you. It's a song called Love Divine. It's a song which showcases that the pain and suffering that we inflict on nature. First of all, nature is a reflection of ourselves. And the pain and suffering that we inflict on nature is pain and suffering that will eventually be inflicted on ourselves. So you can play the video number 1, that is Love Divine. Thank you. Now, with all the problems that we are facing on our planet, you know that there are innumerable problems. Now, as I described earlier, you know, you have climate change, you have species extinction, you have deforestation, you have plastics, you have air pollution, and of course, you've got so many society problems like hunger, violence, poverty, gender inequality. I believe that with all these problems, the biggest threat to our species, to our human species, is the constant thought that we have that somebody else will make a difference. You know, we are always waiting for other people to make a difference. We're waiting for governments to make a difference, intergovernmental bodies, NGOs, corporations, leaders, politicians to make a difference. When the truth is that all that we require right now to solve all of our problems is basically behavioral change. So now everybody talks about, you know, changing the world, but nobody talks about changing themselves. And that's not because all of us are evil people over here. It's not because we're evil and we don't want to change the world or we don't want to change ourselves. It's just because we have not empowered ourselves to believe that the small and tiny incremental changes that we make within our own lives will actually make a difference in the long run. You know, so what we need to do is that we need to empower ourselves to believe that tiny, small changes of lesser consumption, reducing our dependence on fossil fuels, reducing our use of single-use plastic, these small things that we do can actually make a huge difference. So just being more compassionate, being more kind to others, showcasing a lot of empathy in our lives, these are things that can actually make a difference. And you can make 1,000 speeches about this. You can showcase a ton of scientific data about this. You can show a lot of analytics, but at the end of the day, what we need is for artists. You know, like over here, there are dancers and musicians, and I'm sure there are others too. But what is required is for artists to take these speeches, to take these scientific data, and to simplify it into, take these complex ideas, these seemingly complex ideas, and to simplify it in the emotional language of art, and in my case, it's music, such that it touches the hearts and souls of people. You know, and that is what is important, because you have to make an emotional connect with people, and that is what is required. You need to make everyone believe that the small changes that they make within their own lives is extremely powerful, and that is what is required. Now, so when I do my concerts, of course, I make a lot of music and I release that music, but I feel that the most powerful thing that I feel that I do is basically concerts, and of course, that's not been happening since March last year. But nevertheless, when I do my concerts, they are of two kinds. So what I call the top-down approach and what I call the ground-up approach. Now, the top-down approach is pretty much preaching to the choir, where I'm performing to world leaders, performed now 3 times at the UN General Assembly, at the UN headquarters in Geneva, to Fortune 500 companies, and so intimate gatherings of people who can bring about massive change, through their influence and through their sectors or through their constituencies. So that is one type of a concert. The second kind of a concert is, as I said, is a ground-up approach, where I perform at music festivals to massive audiences, 20,000, 40,000, 1 lakh stadiums, that kind of a thing, play to large audiences, and where, again, I'm trying to empower everyone through my music and through my advocacy that all of us are in this together. All of us are absolutely in this together. And basically, all of us need to understand that the small changes we bring about in our own lives can make a huge difference, and that's all that is required. We don't need to solve the world's problems of poverty. We don't need to we don't need to bring about zero poverty in the world or zero hunger in the world or, or transform the world. All that we need to do is transform ourselves, and that's more than enough. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to play you a song that I wrote. It's called Shine Your Light. Now, this particular song, if any of you have been to any of my concerts, it's a song that I've been performing in 2019. So it's a song just about this, about empowering everybody to believe that they can be the change. And the video that you're going to see of the song, accompanying the song, is basically my performances in 2019 in about, I think it's about 8 countries and about 13 or 14 cities. So you'll see what the whole thing looks like and how this is done. So could you play video number 2, Shine Your Light?
Shine your light.
somewhere along our journey of being humans, we have forgotten that we are not the only species on this planet. We are just one among millions and millions of species on this planet.
We are all in this together. We are all in this together. And nothing can remind us like a simple act of kindness. Hey! And in the blackest of night, just one flash of light shows we're not alone. No, not today. It is time. Let's do this. It's our time. Let's do this. It is time to shine your light. Let's do this. It is time to shine your light.
We only protect things that we love. So we should all make it our mission to make everyone fall in love with the natural world. And hopefully through that love, we will clean, protect and conserve.
It is time. Shine your light.
मैं जो साथ निभाऊं, तू जो साथ निभाए, तो बात बन जाए, तो ये रात ढल जाए. चलो हाथ बढ़ाएं, चलो सबको दिखाएं, कोई भी यहाँ अकेला ना है.
It is time. Let's do this. It's our time. Let's do this. It is time to shine your light. Let's do this. It is time to shine your light. Come on.
The pain and suffering that we inflict on the environment and nature is pain and suffering that will eventually be inflicted on us as a species. And we need to start thinking as a species.
It is time. Let's do this. It's our time. Let's do this. It is time to shine your light. It is time. Let's do this. It's our time. Let's do this. It is time to shine your light.
We do not inherit this world from our ancestors, but we borrow it from our children.
Shine your light.
Thank you and good night.
So to conclude, I'd like to quote Baba Diom, the famous Senegalese philosopher. So what Baba Diom said is that at the end of the day, we as human beings, we will only protect things that we love. You know, that's how we are, we'll only protect our inner circle, we'll only protect things that we love. And we'll only love things that we understand, and we will only understand things that we are taught. So I'll just repeat that. We as human beings will only protect things that we love, we will only love things that we understand, and we will only understand things that we are taught. So I've tried to make it my mission in life to make everyone fall in love with the natural world, and hopefully through that love, we will find it within ourselves to protect, to conserve, and to sustain. Now, being a musician, one particular tune which I find to be my favorite tune, and not just because of of how great the melody is and how great the words are, but also of what it instills in everyone the minute you listen to it. And that is the Indian National Anthem. The Indian National Anthem, not only is it a great tune and great words, and a great composition, but the thing is that it has got that magic effect on all of us that the minute you listen to it, you are instilled with a sense of pride in our country, and you're also instilled with some sort of patriotism. It could be in any angle, but you are instilled in some sense of a patriotism as soon as you listen to it. So, since I'm an environmentalist, I thought that that if I make an instrumental version of our national anthem, then what should I showcase in the video? So now we human beings have been on our planet for the last 300,000 years. But most animals that we see in our forests, and even the creepy crawly ones, even the large ones, have been walking our planet for 300 million years. So 300 million years and 300,000 years. So basically, who are the true citizens of India, and at least in my opinion, they are the forests and wildlife, because they've existed on our land long before any humans have ever set foot here. They define our beauty, they define our sustainability, and they define, our own preservation, because without them, we as humans cannot exist. So that's why I created a version of our national anthem to showcase that India is much more than just humans. And also, that's the power of music. That, on a personal note, when you listen to this song, you have a sense of patriotism, you have a sense of love for the country. And when you're watching these visuals of these animals, some of them being endangered, some of them on the brink of extinction, then immediately you feel that these are also citizens like me, and I need to protect them. And we are just one big whole family, one big Indian family. And I believe that with 1.3 billion people in India, if we protect our environment, if we protect nature, then we are saving the world. Am I right? So if you save India, you're saving the world. There's no two ways about it. So if you'd all indulge me, let us all rise for the true citizens of India, and let us all rise for the Indian national anthem. Thank you so much, everybody, and thank you, Madhu, for this amazing opportunity. Thank you.